Welcome into another episode of Making the Leap. We're so glad that you're here with us today. We have just been, like I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, great guests, great opportunities. And this one was one that came across through our email, across our desks, I'll say, and really caught my eye because one thing we talk about a lot in here with our podcast and for our guests is, you know, moving kids from from public school into a Christian school environment, whether it's homeschool, private school. But this is a unique opportunity to talk with somebody who is doing something a little bit different. And I am in full support, but I'm curious. He is working with bringing Christian education, a form of religious education, Christian education into public schools, which I cannot think of a better time for that to be happening.
Yeah, this made me think of the story of Joe Kennedy. It makes me think that this story probably is going to be much more successful for our guest, Joel Penton, because of what Joe Kennedy's success and that level of success he had at the Supreme Court. So we welcome in, yes, the founder and CEO of Lifewise Academy, Joel Penton. Good to meet you, Joel. Welcome into the show.
Well, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on.
The Joe Kennedy case that I bring up, just because your organization, and you're going to tell us all about it, because your organization is about taking biblical principles and biblical studies into the public school, this is probably a conversation even a year or two ago. A lot of people would have said, oh, no, you can't do that, Joel.
Oh, certainly. Usually, even to this day, people, when they hear what we do, which I'll explain soon, but when they hear it, a very typical answer is, surely that is illegal. Surely you can't do that. What about the separation of church and state? What about how the Bible and prayer have been removed from the public school day? And very few people realize what opportunities we really have before us.
That's one of the things that I love it. I think it's a great combat to some of these Satan clubs that have been popping up across the country. I actually just recently crossed the state lines, actually in Kansas. There has been a pretty, I would say, robust,
aggressive
pushback against that club starting, and the growth. It's almost like it's a little mini revival in some ways. They countered it with a Christian club or a Jesus club, I think is what they called it, and it had, hundreds of people show up and worshiping in a way that I think is phenomenal. And it is that counter to those Satan clubs. And I would guess that's something that is probably first and foremost in your mind, is it not?
Well, it's definitely something we bump into. And I'm going to say something that sounds very bizarre, but there's something I really like about the Satan club. I don't like the Satan club, but I tell people that we are certainly not scared of the Satan Club. I have my background. I played college football years ago at the Ohio State University, and this thing of competition is not something, at least that I personally shy away from, nor our whole team here with Lifewise. And so the only thing we want to avoid is silence when it comes to the gospel. If there's a hearing for the Satan Club or this and that, provided the gospel has its opportunity to be out there in the marketplace, we're fine with that because we have confidence that the gospel wins in the marketplace of ideas. And so we are not fearful that the Satan Club is going to come in and win all sorts of followers or something. We're not concerned.
So, Joel, we met some of your colleagues from Lifewise at the National Religious Broadcasters event in Nashville a few weeks ago, and talked a little about Lifewise with them. But as you're the founder, the guy that launched the whole thing, tell us, for those that might have missed that, what is Lifewise? How did it come to be?
Yes, well, thank you. Well, I'll tell you, simply put, Lifewise provides Bible education to public school students during school hours. And of course, those three kind of combinations of those three things, Bible education, public school students during school hours, is what many people find hard to believe. What few people realize, what I didn't realize until just a number of years ago, was that in 1952, the Supreme Court ruled that public school students can receive religious instruction, in our case, Bible education, during school hours, provided the program meets three criteria. Number one, being off school property. Number two, privately funded. And number three, with parental permission. It's called released time religious instruction is the legal term. And so this has been around since 1952 is when the Supreme Court ruled. However, sadly, it has gone just kind of under the radar. Few people realize this is possible. We like to say it might be the single greatest missed opportunity of the American church to reach the next generation. And just to illustrate the amazing opportunity, I will tell you how this all got started. It was inspired by a released time program in my hometown of Van Wert, Ohio. That's how I got looped into this thing, because people in my hometown called me to say, hey, we have this release time program. They had to explain to me what it was. I'd never heard of it. And they explained that they had started this program, bought a house next to the school, started enrolling students, teach them the Bible, again, during school hours as part of their daily or weekly, in the same way kids get art class once a week. Now they can sign up for Bible class once a week. But they shared with me that they had get this, over 95% of the entire school was enrolled in this program, being taught the Bible on a weekly basis. They came to me with the simple question: why don't we see this type of program in more communities? That led me down the path of saying, well, what if we started a plug and play, scalable, repeatable program, so that communities wouldn't have to communities wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. They could implement right away. That's how Lifewise Academy was born.
Well, this is very exciting because I think there are a lot of people who talk with us about Christian education, but think for various reasons, and that's why we do this show, is to encourage people and talk through some of the myths about Christian education. But for people that aren't ready to make the leap, maybe this is the next best thing, and that's the point of this. You bring it to their public school, and maybe that makes people a little more comfortable. So could you talk about how this works? Release time religious instruction, off campus, privately funded, we get that. How would that let's just say I've got a junior in high school, and he or she, I would like to see them be a part of Lifewise in this release time religious instruction. What does a day look like? Is that like an hour that they allow her to leave campus to go study with you, or what's it look like?
Well, if it's all right with you, I'm going to modify your example and make it an elementary school student. And the reason is that we tend to start at the elementary school level.
Okay, sure.
And things start to look a bit different at the high school level. And I can explain that if we have time. But at the elementary school level, kids have a weekly rotation of something called specials. And so they have art class, music class, gym class. They have a variety of things that they don't get every single day, but they get on a rotation. Lifewise tends to be incorporated into that rotation, so that, yes, once a week, each student can be released for 45 minutes to an hour. It varies a bit from school to school. And so the example I gave of my hometown, it takes 3.5 days a week for them to rotate 2 classrooms at a time through this rotation, so that every student can attend and receive a Bible lesson. Now, how it gets started is a local community effort. On our website, lifewise.org, anybody could go there. You can find any school district in the nation, and you can begin the 10-step process to start a local Lifewise program. It all starts with collecting signatures, kind of a petition of 50 people in town saying, yes, I'd love to see this in my community. And we help walk communities through the process. It's a local effort. We provide the tools, but it's a local effort to establish a program. And then, yes, it usually starts at the elementary level. Kids get it once a week. At the middle and high school level, at that point, it can often become a daily elective course. And so in the same way, a teenager might have chemistry class every day for a semester, they might get Lifewise every day, but maybe just for a semester at a time.
Does the school have to sanction that, Joel? Is that something you have to go to the school and say, I want Lifewise every day for my middle schooler and high schooler, and then the school has to say, yes, okay, that's fine, we accept that?
It varies from state to state how we have to go about it. And in fact, all these details that you're beginning to wonder is what has kind of held back this thing for what we believe it has held it back for decades, is that there's a lot of details and there's a lot of logistics. And so that is why Lifewise exists, is to help communities, walk through all of that. And so depending on the state, usually, in fact, almost without exception, we put together a plan that we take to the school, and we want to make sure we secure school cooperation, coordination. We want to communicate well. We present them a logistical plan. They approve that, and then we can begin receiving enrollment. And if I could, you mentioned, that this podcast is all about making the leap. And that perhaps a parent isn't quite ready to make the leap. And that all makes sense. And I agree with that. Let me also say this, though. You're talking to a guy that is a homeschool father. I'm a homeschool family.
Okay.
And we're so involved in Lifewise in part because we know that we homeschool, but we still want to be engaged with our community. And in fact, what
Yes.
you would find is that if you dig into the families that are doing Lifewise, a lot of the communities have a lot of homeschool families that are driving the program as a way to engage and to pour into the students and the families in their local public schools.
Which is such a, I love that. And you think about the whole, salt and light, how to be a light for somebody, how to bring them to, to where we do want our kids to go. And so I think that is amazing. Is it when you, I guess what I'm wondering, I used to be a public school teacher, and I'm just, I'm thinking through these logistics as you're sharing the details about it and what that would look like. Is this met with resistance in a way that that is preventing you from going somewhere? In other words, is there ever a time, or have you come across schools where enough teachers have said, no, I don't want this here, or no, we don't want, where they've caused that pushback or that initial, I guess, roadblock to, you Lifewise coming in and helping to facilitate that?
Sure. Yeah, we have had some resistance. We have had some opposition. However, I will say it has been honestly less than we expected.
Great.
From time to time, there is a superintendent or a school board or a group of teachers that is particularly resistant. And truth be told, it's fairly often there's a certain amount of at least hesitation on the front end. How's this going to work?
Mm-hmm.
What we see consistently is that once the program gets going, essentially everybody loves it. They see the value, they see the benefit, they see the changes in their students, and they see how the logistics really do work out. And then there are some schools that just kind of flat out say no, and we're not able to get it started. But those are few and far between. Our numbers right now, once we get to the point that we're able to sit down with the school and make the case and say, could we implement this? 93% of the time, the school says yes. So we have 7% that
Wow.
doesn't work out, but 93% of the time it does.
I'm sorry I get hung up on the details, but I guess that's just the nature of the show. And my curious nature is, you said that it has to happen off campus. It has to happen off school property. Is that transportation then? Is that, how do you get an elementary school kid out of the school for a period of time to speak with your guys at Lifewise?
Right. I think about just what it takes to do a field trip versus, what this might look like. I'm kind of envisioning that same process. That I'm curious as well.
Oh, yes. Well, here you go again. These are the details that make it in a way challenging. It's not
Mm-hmm.
rocket science. But there are a lot of details, and that's, again, we exist to provide all of those templates and things. But yeah, it's an operation. So let me give you the most extreme example and say that it's only easy. It can only be this difficult, and it's usually easier. But we have a school that there's an elementary school, and there's 1,000 students in the elementary school, and 900 of them are in Lifewise Academy.
Wow.
And so we own a 72 passenger bus that 5 times a day, 5 days a week, pulls up to the school. It's a big red bus, says Lifewise Academy on the side of it. And 2 classrooms of kids walk out of the school, get on the bus. A volunteer meets them at the door, walks them. The moment they leave the school doors, they're our responsibility. They're under our liability insurance. We're transporting them. We've got the volunteers. So if we get them on the bus, take them less than a mile down the road to the YMCA. They go into 2 classrooms, receive their Bible class. 45 minutes later, they get back on the bus. They come back to the school, pick up another group, and they do that again 5 times a day, 5 days a week, with different kids, so that every kid can get it once a week.
And then I assume this is scalable. You've got busloads of kids 5 times a day versus maybe there's 3 kids in one school somewhere that you only have to tend to maybe once a week or something.
That's right. There's all sorts of different scales of the program, and we have some schools that are real small schools, and they're not many students, and so it's just a handful of kids, and so it costs next to nothing. Everything's volunteer, and there's a church next door. And so it's, it's a small operation all the way to the point where you got a full-time director, you got full-time teachers, you got vehicles. And we have many programs that have their own buildings, their own facilities. And so it really varies from community to community.
So, in terms of your curriculum, then, I'm thinking about Bible studies I've been part of, that plug and play concept where it can be, like you said, repeatable across the board. What does the curriculum look like? Is it, I'm thinking, is it studying chapter by chapter? Is it worksheet? Is it hands-on? Is it, what does that look like for, I'm sure it obviously changes from grade level to grade level, but overall, how is that set up? I guess if you can kind of give that picture for people who might be listening and think, I want to bring this into my school.
Right. Well, yeah, we do have a curriculum, and we have a wonderful agreement with the Gospel Project, which is a Sunday school curriculum that under our licensing agreement, we're able to modify it a little bit to just, reformat it to suit the unique needs of a release time program. But what's wonderful about the Gospel Project is it starts with the Bible. So in fact, over the course of 5 years in elementary school, grades 1 through 5, students go through the entire Bible. So they start in Genesis in first grade. By the time they finish elementary school, they've been all the way through the Bible through Revelation. Every lesson has a threefold focus: head, heart, and hands. And so this order is important to us, that we start with the information on the page. We start with the Bible itself, and we read it, and we say, what does it say? And we get that in our head. And then heart, we take a step back and we say, how does this Bible story, how does this passage point to the bigger picture story, the gospel message? How does this point to Jesus? And so we're doing that heart gospel work every single week. And then finally, hands, we say, if we rightly understand this, if we're rightly transformed by the gospel, how does that transform what we do? How does it transform our character? How does it transform the way we live our lives? And so each and every week, kids are going through that head, heart, hands focus all the way through the Bible, grades 1 through 5 at middle school and high school. We then have other curriculum that gets a little more focused, and again, is often more, here's a course for this semester diving into this book of the Bible, or it kind of varies from grade to grade.
What's interesting about this is we started talking about the Satan Club. This is not a club. This is different because it's a curriculum, and it's considered sort of a course, if you will, which makes it unique. This is not like an after-school event. This is a during school event. Take that, Satan Club.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it is. It's certainly devotional in the sense that we're praying with our students. There's sometimes a song, and we're talking about the gospel, and we're doing deep heart work. And yet, yes, you would say it's much more of an academic setting. I mean, we have desks and tables, and kids come in, and there's a teacher, and I mean, we are teaching kids about, part of our philosophy is that the Bible, the Word of God, is going to do the work. And so what is our job is to get that in front of students and let it do its work. We don't need to get fancy. We're going to do things with excellence, and we're going to do things professionally and, totally above board. But at the end of the day, we're teaching the Word of God and trusting the Lord to use it.
Well, I think what you just said, the word above board, there is nothing that is nefarious in nature. This isn't sneaky. This isn't underhanded. It's not subversive. It is out there. And like you said, the Bible will speak when you're listening. I mean, it will speak to everybody individually in its own way. And I just think that's a tremendous use of resources, especially when you're talking about homeschooling families that maybe have the time and the ability to come in and be those leaders. That's just phenomenal.
That's a great point too. Can homeschool, you say you homeschool your kids.
I mean, take my family as an example. I mean, obviously I'm the founder and we started this thing, but now in our community is a local Lifewise, and it happens to be the elementary school where my kids would go to school. And so they, in fact, do go, and they're a part of the Lifewise class. And while my kids are a part of that, my wife is a volunteer. And so she's walking kids back and forth, getting them to their class. And it's just, what we have found is that our original intention and still primary intention is we want to teach the gospel, the Word of God, to children who desperately need it. And yet we're seeing the impact being much more than that, that it is reintroducing, it's affecting the culture, the culture of the school, the culture of the churches coming together. It's not weird anymore for kids to take their Bible to school, for kids to
Mhm.
talk about Jesus during school, because they were just at Lifewise for one of their classes, and it's really having a pretty far-reaching impact.
That was I'm so glad you went on to say that, because that was my question, was do homeschool kids like yours get involved in the lesson planning? So what an opportune time it is to introduce homeschool kids to public school kids and learn together. But I love
And
that.
create a community sense versus an us-them type
Yeah.
setting.
And
I
I
think
know
that's
that
good.
this is a question, again, down into specifics, but there are people listening and they think, Joel, boy, I'd like to do this here in Pleasantville, Montana, but we don't have anything like this in Pleasantville, Montana. What would you say if I really want to start this in my community? What's step one?
Well, let me start with step zero. Step zero is understanding that it can absolutely happen in Pleasantville, Montana. We're live this year in about 350 schools across 15 states. We are in the most inner city, high crime neighborhoods. In some cities, we are in the most remote and rural communities. We're in the suburbs. We're confirmed to be in Los Angeles, California next year. So if you're in wherever you are, if you're hearing this and you like it, just know, be confident it can happen where you are. And I'll tell you how you can get it started very, very simply. You got to get to our website, lifewise.org. You can look up any one of the 13,000 school districts in the nation, find your school district, and see where things are at. Likely, a movement has not yet been started, but you can start it. Even if you're not going to be the eventual teacher or director or board member, that's okay. You can sign your local community interest list. You can send that. You can post it on Facebook. You can send it to your friends, gather the 50 signatures. As you think about the scale of this operation, you are probably thinking, there's no way I can pull all this off. And you would be right. You can't pull it all off by yourself.
Mhm.
You first start with getting 49 friends. And so you need to sign the local list on our website and send that around, and just see the people that God raises up to be on the steering committee, to be the donors, to be the volunteers. But it all starts with adding your name to the list.
I am so grateful we had the chance to have this conversation. I I feel like I want to take this and just start sending it out to people that have specifically said, I'm in public school as an educator or as a parent, I'm staying, but I feel a lot of overwhelm on what's kind of happening, and this seems like such a great way to combat it, really, in a lot of ways, kind of combat that culture and just kind of show a different option. You have a book that if people are interested in, I know you have a couple of books. The one specifically that I just saw was called During School Hours, Why and How Lifewise Academy is Reinstalling Religious Education into the Public School Day. I know that's could be of interest to people visiting your website, lifewise.org. Is there any other social media aspect or anything that you would like to share to encourage people to reach out, ways to reach out? Is that the primary place?
Yeah, I think our website, we did write the book to try to expand
Hmm.
and amplify and clarify the message, but the website's the place where you can find your school district. You can plug in. If at some point you get the book and read it, cool, but that's not our main priority. It's let's get a Lifewise started in your community. And yeah, I'm so grateful for this podcast. I'm great. People sometimes ask, are we competing with private schools or homeschools? And of course I laugh because I'm a homeschool family. And I think, no, this is simply an effort to get the gospel to all students. You and I both know that even if there's major, developments in kids going to private school and homeschool, 10 years from now, there's still going to be many, many,
Yes.
many families in the public schools, and they desperately need the word of God. And so
Yes.
we want more private, more homeschool, and more Lifewise to get the Bible to everybody.
This is, Tony Perkins, we just spoke with also at the National Religious Broadcasters, Joel, and I know you need to run, but we spoke with him, and, it was his position also as a homeschool dad. He didn't see it as incumbent on the kids to be missionaries in the public schools, but he certainly made it a priority that adults ought to be, and this is exactly how you do it. Not just run for school board, but and that's great.
Right.
But imagine implementing one of these in your school district. That's real work for the Lord there.
I couldn't agree more. And he and I have a kind of probably a similar take on kids as missionaries and responsibilities. It's interesting to hear. And yeah, I couldn't agree. And I appreciate the platform to be able to share.
Well, thank you again for your time. We will post all this information will be in our show notes. There are some links that I think we're also going to try to put down as well. There's some YouTube, just some different outlets to read more, learn more. Everything will be there. Joel, again, thank you so much for your time. And if we ever obviously can, be in contact to help you, I'd love it. I will be sending some emails as soon as we are done. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
So that makes the first show that we've ever done talking about how we can bring Christ to a public school, which has not really ever been the focus of this show, but I'm more than willing to entertain it. And I like what he said. He doesn't see us as in competition, and I like that.
Right. Well, and if we're really talking about the reason we have our children, at least for us, I guess I can't speak for other people, but we have ours in there, number one, to grow as a disciple for Jesus, to be that. If that's really what we're saying we want to do, then the avenue to me doesn't necessarily matter. Obviously, we're doing this because this is what has worked, what we have chosen to go do, but this is what he has chosen to go do and to impact. And truly going, when you're talking about kids coming home, hey, this is what I did, that then in turn impacts parents, that in turn impacts churches. And I just think it's a really tremendous outlet to do something with that is maybe it's just a little bit different.
Well, it makes me think of our oldest son, who's no longer in school, but he shared with me that one of his coaches a couple of years ago tried to start a Bible study and was hosting it in the morning at a middle school in the district. And that ceased to happen because they didn't like that he was conducting this Bible study before school hours in the school. So maybe that runs afoul of something because it's in a school, but this is exactly the point. There was an interest in it. A lot of the boys on his football team were involved in it, and the coach ultimately said, well, okay, if I'm going to be hassled about it, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Well, here you go. Here's your answer. Here's a community's answer to this. Rather than put it on a coach or a teacher, heck, you can just go to the school yourself and arrange it with 49 other people in your town yourself. You don't have to, God bless teachers and coaches that want to do it, but maybe we as citizens parents should take the burden off of them to do it.
Well, and I say as parents, but really I guess what I'm saying is as Christians, it doesn't have to be, I could. We, in a few months, we're not going to have any kids sitting in a public school. And why not? I would come alongside somebody for something, along this direction. And we do or do not, have churches all over the place with open spaces. We have community centers with open spaces. I can see it as being I don't want to say easy, but I think there are definite.
Our church sits right next door to a middle school. Our church literally sits next door to a middle school. Like,
and
you
if
could
your
imagine
parents have signed off, where's the objection?
And I have to say, just because it's sort of fun, I can imagine how antagonizing this would be to the haters, and I would sort of delight in that fight.
I'm not sure that's the most Christian
thing
to say.
I know it's not, but I would love to throw around 1952, and that's
so
much fun.
But it is good. It is good to know when you hear this whole separate, church and state, la 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 la. Well, no, there are some things in place. I had no idea this existed for the last 70 years. I didn't know that, and yet here we are sitting culturally in the problems that we have. So, I don't know, something to think about. I know some principals and some teachers and some parents. So
Joel, just so we are clear about this, if you ever listen to this show and you think, gosh, I'd like to be on Making the Leap, or I've got some stuff going on in my community I think they'd like to hear about. That's how we met Joel. That's how we meet a lot of our guests. They reach out and they say, I'd like to be on the show. How do people do that?
They can do that by sending us an email anytime. hello@makingtheleappodcast.com is how you email us. We have social media where comments are read daily, sent on to us. We then turn around and make contact when it's something that fits and works.
People generally can talk to you directly. You'll reach out to them.
I do. I will send emails back. We'll have conversations, pre-conversations if we need. We're always willing to do that. That's my job. That's what I do. That's kind of what I just, I'm like, that's my thing. So I enjoy it. And I think it's a great way to spread the word on what we're doing. We love talking with parents very specifically about how programs like this or Christian school or homeschool has changed your family and what it is doing, because it is through that we see evidence of how God works. And like Joel was saying, using the gospel to speak for itself. And that's definitely what I think we're all about, no matter what venue or avenue you choose to go. So any of those options will work for us. All our social information, socials are down below. Clips will put down below. All of that is an option. And we just look forward to hearing from you and talking with you and bringing more of these stories to you.
And until next week, we will see you again on Making the Leap.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please like and subscribe to the show and turn on notifications so that you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.